This episode is brought to you by Iams Pet Food. When you choose Iams dry dog or cat food, you can see a difference in your pet with your own eyes. Healthy energy in 5 days, healthy digestion in 10 days, and healthy skin and coat in just 25 days. Satisfaction for you and them. Guaranteed or your money back. Feed Iams dry dog or cat food and see a visible difference. Visit iams.com/difference to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by Global X. Since 2008, Global X ETFs has been committed to empowering investors with unexplored, intelligent solutions. Global X specializes in exchange-traded funds that offer exposure to the artificial intelligence ecosystem, including themes like data centers, robotics, semiconductors, and cloud computing. To learn more about Global X's entire suite of ETFs, from covered calls, fixed income, emerging markets, and more, visit globalxetfs.com.
This is Optimal Finance Daily. This money belief is what keeps many people in debt, by Kelley Long of financialfinesse.com. And I'm your host and personal finance enthusiast, Diana Merriam. Now let's get right to today's post and start optimizing your life. This money belief is what keeps many people in debt, by Kelley Long of financialfinesse.com. One of the most interesting things I've learned from having the opportunity to discuss money with people from all walks of life is how much of an effect that our deep-seated money beliefs have on our financial outcomes. One of these beliefs is how we perceive whether or not we need to buy something. Some people buy what they can afford, while others go with what they actually need. I know, because I used to embody this belief. Little decisions that are actually a big deal. Every day we make little decisions, like whether to take the bus or hail a cab, or whether to cook dinner versus ordering delivery, that aren't really just about time and/or a willingness to go the tougher route. How you make these decisions is actually a key determinant of your financial situation. It's how even people who make hundreds of thousands of dollars per year end up riddled with debt and with very little savings. True story, I know people like this. What it looks like. This really struck home with me recently when I met up with friends who had taken the subway and walked about half a mile to the place we were meeting. A minor inconvenience versus just getting dropped off out front. These are people who could easily afford the $10 it would cost to hire a ride. But their mindset is, why spend the money if we don't have to? On the flip side, I've heard people joke that they're too poor to own a car, but not so poor that they have to ride the bus. The irony is that I own a car, and yet I take the bus all the time. Finding the economical way to accomplish life is not just about whether or not you can afford it. It's about spending according to what you need. It's a mindset. Why it's a big deal. This may not seem like a big deal. Saving $10 here and there on transportation around a city is not going to make or break your ability to retire. But that mindset where your spending decisions are made by whether or not you can afford something versus whether you really need to spend the money is what's so dangerous. Many people use the affordability test when deciding what kind of car or house to buy. Just because you can squeeze $450 a month out of your budget in order to make a car payment doesn't mean you need that nice of a car. Likewise, the feeling of being house poor often originates from someone buying what they think they can afford, which is really much more than they need. How this mindset had me living paycheck to paycheck until my 30s. I can get a little lectury on this, but that's only because I've been there. Until about the age of 32, I was caught in a loop of saving and spending that was keeping me on the edge financially, no matter how much or how little money I made. I lived in the nicest apartment I could afford and bought my last new car based literally on what I had left over in my bank account each month, not based on what would allow me to work towards other goals of escaping credit card debt and building up an emergency fund. What changed for me? The thing that revealed this psychology to me was when I found myself needing dental work that required an upfront payment in excess of $5,000, which of course I didn't have. Without a second thought, I charged it to a credit card, then started aggressively paying $300 per month towards the balance until it was gone. My aha moment was when I realized that I was able to find $300 per month towards a payment. But prior to that, I somehow didn't feel like I could afford to save that same amount. Once I paid that balance off, I immediately added an automatic deposit to my savings in the same amount, which eventually led to a real emergency fund. Seeing the balance of that account hit $1,000 led to a shift. Having a comma in my savings account relieved a burden of financial stress I didn't even know I was carrying. The key takeaway. It was a crucial lesson that translated to literally every other payment I had in my life. In the past, whenever I had a payment end, such as paying off my car loan, I always found a way to replace that payment, like moving into a more expensive apartment. If I could go back in time, I'd stop 30-year-old Kelley and tell her to instead stay in the cheaper apartment and stop paying for things just because she could afford them. And instead, talk to her about living within your means according to what you need versus what you want or can afford. The next time you find yourself making a financial decision with the reasoning that it's what you can afford, stop and ask yourself if it's also what you really need or if it might make more sense to keep that money in your pocket. The way I talk myself out of spending in these situations today is to remind myself that every dollar I don't spend today is a dollar that can help me stop working sooner. You just listened to the post titled, "This Money Belief is What Keeps Many People in Debt" by Kelley Long of financialfinesse.com, and I'll be right back with my commentary. Buy low, sell high. It's easy to say, hard to do. For example, high interest rates are crushing the real estate market right now. Demand is dropping and prices are falling, even for many of the best assets. It's no wonder the F.I.R.E flagship fund plans to go on a buying spree, expanding its billion-dollar real estate portfolio over the next few months. You can add the F.I.R.E flagship fund to your portfolio in just minutes and with as little as $10 by visiting fundrise.com/OFD. That's FUNDRISE.com/OFD. Carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the F.I.R.E flagship fund before investing. This and other information can be found in the fund's prospectus at fundrise.com/flagship. This is a paid advertisement.
Behind the bright lights and adrenaline of pro sports is an equally exciting world of negotiations and deal making.
That's what we cover each week on our podcast, The Deal.
I'm Alex Rodriguez, former baseball player turned business executive.
And I'm Jason Kelley, chief correspondent for Bloomberg Originals. Over the next couple months, we'll hear from all-stars like Jay Williams.
I want to be an owner one day.
Billie Jean King.
Learn the business.
And so many more. Listen to The Deal on Spotify.
I think the word afford is a very subjective and relative term. For instance, many people claim they can afford their mortgage because the bank looked at their finances and determined that they could afford to pay 30% of their income towards their housing costs. But as soon as the roof leaks or a pipe bursts, all of a sudden the home isn't so affordable because they have no savings to come to the rescue. My definition of affordability has changed drastically on my financial journey. When I was 28 and first started becoming financially literate, I was making about 80 grand per year. I was also 30 grand in high interest consumer debt and living paycheck to paycheck. At that time, I decided that I could not afford any discretionary spending. I treated my debt as an emergency and threw all my money at paying it off as quickly as possible, which led me to get out of that debt in 11 months. Then, as my income climbed, I saved and invested about 60% of my earnings and got myself to the financial position to quit my job a few years ago. Now, I make much less than 80 grand per year, but my assets are such that I can afford much more than I could when I had no assets and only debt. I tell you this to demonstrate that your income is not the only factor to determine if you can afford something. You have to look at the expense in the context of your entire financial picture. How much debt do you have? What are your other expenses? How much of a gap do you have between your income and expenses? And where are you in terms of savings and investments? But that should do it for today. Thank you for listening, and thank you if you've ever shared this show with someone. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you tomorrow where your optimal life awaits.